The Church Defenders Organization has taken the CRL Rights Commission Section 22 committee to the High Court. It claims it's overstepping in its mandate and interfering in church governance. The SACD says the framework that's now been put on the table goes beyond advisory roles, effectively amounting to state intrusion into church affairs. Let's speak to Pastor Mpfariseni Mukhuba, the Chairperson of South African Church Defenders. Good to talk to you on this Christmas evening. Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for being on SABC News, Pastor. So why are you so opposed to the proposal that there be more regulation of churches?
Good evening to you and Merry Christmas to you. We are the SACD, and yes, we are opposing the regulation of churches because that will be state interference in matters of religion, in matters of faith, which can be very, very dangerous because, matters of faith do not fall under the domain of government, religious callings of pastors that cannot be regulated by a human being.
Mm-hmm. But is that not the problem? Because what we've seen in the last few years is the abuse of that lack of regulation, people being fed grass. We remember those stories. We were told of churches staging things like resurrections and people who claimed they were paid to pretend that they were healed, for example, during services. So if the religious community had itself held itself to a higher standard, we wouldn't be here in the first place. Is there not an argument to be made to that effect?
You know, it is true. There are abuses that do happen in churches. There is criminality that do happen in churches. But the thing that we are saying is, if there is any criminality that is perpetuated by anybody who is in the church, let the law deal with those people who are perpetuating such criminal activities, because there is no crime that is specific to a church. Crime is everywhere, and crime should be dealt with by competent institutions that we have in our country and by the laws that are existing in our country.
So are you saying, Pastor, that if it's not something that is classified a crime, it should be able to happen within a religious setting? Is that what you're saying?
You know, when we come to matters of belief, when we come to matters of faith, when we come to religious practices, looking at our constitution protects different kinds of beliefs. And sometimes what people say that this is bizarre, this is somehow, there is what is protected by the constitution. If somebody is practicing their faith and they believe that what they are doing is a practice that is of their faith, then they are protected by the constitution. And I'm going to reiterate that if it is something that is violating the law, let the law take its course.
And I want to circle back once again, Pastor, to say, is there not a very thin line between the bizarre, the illegal, and outright abuses where people are basically taken for a ride? Yes, you may not be the victim of a clear-cut scam or physical violence, but you're still being taken for a ride in a way by someone who claims to be, to have a calling, to be of the clergy.
If we are talking about laws, when we are talking about laws are supposed to apply equally to everyone. And I believe that in society, there are things that might not be violating the law, which are not right, which are done by people. And I believe that those who are pastors are supposed to behave in a good way, in a way that earns public trust and the trust of those that they are leading. So I'm going to say the same thing, that if anybody is doing something that is out, let them be dealt with. And I'm going to say this, that churches are self-regulating, they are regulating themselves, there are fraternals, there are church standards, and there are policies of churches that are implemented. But anywhere where there is abuse, let that abuse be dealt with by those who are competent to deal with it.
But what about a false gospel? Because there is the warning to be aware of false prophets. So is there not merit to say that even that is something that the church should guard against, where the word itself is manipulated and used for the benefit of whoever is standing at a pulpit?
You know, who determines what is false and what is not false? Who determines that? Who is able to say that this is a true calling, this is not a true calling? If there is any violation, you know, the CRL is allowed to work with established institutions in order to deal with whatever that is not going right. So really to come with a legislation that is very dangerous. We are seeing in many countries right now, even in African countries, that people of faith are getting persecuted because of introducing legislation, because of introducing these laws that are anti-people of faith, anti-people who are Christians. And we cannot allow that to happen in our country.
It's one thing, though, Pastor, to respond to instances where abuse has happened. The point of legislation sometimes is to, because what this framework suggests, perhaps in layman's terms, is a vetting process, for want of a better word. So preventative measures, dealing with the situation or stopping harm before it happens, versus only stepping in, as you're suggesting, at the end when people have either suffered physical, mental, financial suffering as well.
You know, let me say this. We cannot just introduce laws that are particular to Christians, not in our country where there is supposed to be equality. We cannot be starting to do that. Freedoms are hard-earned, and they are fundamental rights which are not supposed to be violated. We cannot allow our constitutional rights to be violated today. We cannot allow that for whatever reason. And I must reiterate the point that I was intended to make before, that the CRL is allowed to educate. They can educate people that if your pastor is doing this, if your leader is doing this, know that this is not right. That we can educate society, because, I mean, people in South Africa, it's not just in the church, everywhere. People don't know their rights, and some people are just ignorant. They need to be educated that this is wrong and this is right. So now there is this like a blanket label that is given to churches, and churches are doing good. We cannot allow churches to be labeled today and pastors to be labeled as delinquent, and this divisive thing that is being put now between congregants and their pastors. We cannot introduce this disorder into the church.
And I'm in no way suggesting that it's the entire religious community that's involved in acts of wrongdoing. It is the few that we've read about and perhaps who are operating, for want of a better word, in other communities. But you mentioned the rights that people have to participate in religious communities. If every right comes with a responsibility, what then is the right or the responsibility of the religious sector within the context of this conversation, and how far should that go?
The religious sector is self-governing, and in each and every society, if I may put it this way, there are delinquents. And you are right to point out that there are a few. And a few cannot be used now to justify legislation, because this legislation will be very dangerous to the church. And it cannot be allowed As I said, yes, freedoms, they come with responsibility. And yes, I'm not supporting, we are in no way as the SACD promoting any abuse, any criminality, but we are rejecting the thing that now we are being labeled, we are being painted with the same brush, which is very wrong, as an excuse, I'm going to put it that way, as an excuse to try to regulate, to silence the church.
Thank you so much for speaking to us on this Christmas Day. Pastor Mpfariseni Mukhuba, grateful for your time, Chairperson of the South African Church Defenders, going to court to challenge the CRL Rights Commission's attempts to further increase, if you will, regulation of the religious sector.